Hi, I'm Dr. Teena Cahill, and welcome to Wisdom and Beyond. We're going to have a great time today because, as you guys know, my doctorate's in clinical psychology, and I have with me here my good friend, Dr. Sharon Press. And Sharon's a child psychologist here in Princeton. And we thought, as we've had off camera many times, we thought we would have a conversation about women, work, and family, and the pressures that are on women both culturally and in all kinds of ways when we try to work outside the home and also grow healthy kids. And Sharon and I have done that. We've both pretty much always worked outside the home, and we like to think we've grown healthy children. You know, there's no guarantee in life, okay?
But we don't sit in their therapy sessions.
Right, but we gave it our best shot, okay? And so let's talk about that a little bit. You have two daughters.
Yes.
And you've worked in the field of psychology for decades, like me, right?
Yes.
And how old were your kids when you went back to work? Or did you never stop?
No, I took off. My first daughter was born, and I had a C-section, so I didn't work for 3 months after that. And then I was working half-time setting up a psychiatric hospital, which was nice because I could take her with me and my nanny with me. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to meetings and I was with architects and writing treatment manuals, she was able to be with me. So it wasn't actually until she was a year old that I went to work full-time. I hated it. Mm-hmm. And then I cut down to part-time by the time she was 2.
Okay. Now, Sharon and I know that we are part of the privileged few. 73.2 or something like that % of the families in this country are dual income. And most mothers do not have a choice as to whether or not they go back to work when that 6 weeks of after birth, whatever that's called, is over. And they have to go back to work. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we think we believe and what some of the research might show as to how we can do that and still grow healthy kids, right?
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot in the news lately about especially some pretty powerful women who work outside of the home and raise their children, and that what basically is being said is that our environment, our society, does not support the working woman.
Well, it's true. We live in a sexist society, let's be clear, right? Money is power. Men have more earning power than women. It's something like, 84 cents on the dollar. It might not be that high. I think that's if you're in a union. I think it's actually in the 70-some cents on the dollar if you're not, for a woman. So the women get 70-some cents, the guy gets $1. So the earning power isn't as great. And then we have this weird issue that when you have a family, it is actually the women that have the children. And in our culture, we're all too happy to blame some woman if something goes wrong in the family. We have these unrealistic expectations of ourselves and other women. And so you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right?
And there's no doubt in my mind that society does not make it easy for women to work outside of the house and take care of their families and accommodate for school holidays, the fact that schools end at 3 o'clock, aftercare is expensive, what happens during summers, what happens during snow days.
And what happens if you're the primary breadwinner? It's one thing to be the secondary breadwinner, it's another thing to be the primary breadwinner.
You know, I think less and less there's primary and secondary. I know a lot of families where both people are making an equal amount of money.
Well, actually, there's some new research that I forget, but it was a large number of the families, the woman is out earning the man, but you're still the mother.
Right, and that doesn't stop. And so, yes, I absolutely agree with all the people who say employers need to be more sensitive. They need to be more flexible with their hours. They need to be understanding of the need for close daycare centers, close to where moms are working. They need to be understanding about needing to take time off to take care of kids when they're sick and not penalize the woman who's working. But the piece that people don't talk about, and as a child psychologist always makes the hair on my neck stand up on end, is everyone's talking about women should be able to work, women should earn as much, if not more money than a man for the same job, women should have the flexibility, women should be able to go back to work as soon as their bodies physically can. But there's an issue in children called attachment.
All right, so let's talk about that. Attachment, that's a big issue in the research that sometimes I think gets both used and abused but we're going to try to use it here, not abuse the idea here. So tell us now, what do you mean when you talk about attachment issues or attachment?
Well, the reality is that children, infants, need to get attached to someone. Frequently, it is the mother, and our society believes it should be the mother. But an infant can get equally attached to a father or a nanny. And basically, attachment starts, and it is biologically pre-programmed in the child and in the mother, which I'll talk about in a minute, so that the person who consistently feeds the child, changes the child's diaper, makes eye contact in the beginning within 12 inches, bathes the child, is there when the child wakes up, is there when the child goes to sleep, that is the person to whom he or she becomes most attached.
And obviously, because women tend to give childbirth, then they're the ones that are going to have the eye contact so early on. But you would agree with me that children can attach to more than one person.
Right, but it is the initial attachment, and here's the thing about being a mom that we have and men don't have. We have something called oxytocin, and when we have a feeling, we release this hormone, and it's called the affiliation hormone, and we want to connect. So when we're upset, we want to talk to the person we're upset with. We certainly want to talk to our spouses or partners about it. When men are upset, they don't feel a need to affiliate. In fact, they'd rather not talk about it. So when the oxytocin, which we get higher levels of it during pregnancy and after childbirth.
And during sex.
Yes, and when it releases, it makes us want to connect.
That's right. It's called the bonding hormone.
Absolutely. So if you want to be able to pump your breast milk and your baby's not around, you need to look at a picture. You need to think about your child. It releases oxytocin, which helps release the milk so that it flows, because if your child was there, you would be bonding. So
women, men have a bonding hormone too, but it's a little bit different than this. And so we're really talking about women and children most here. But so you're saying that women have this biological system built within us to bond with our children.
Right. So whether we are exhausted or massively deprived of calories, we know we will breastfeed. We are programmed to breastfeed our children, get up in the middle of the night, make sure they're okay, keep them warm, do whatever we need to do in spite of getting very little back from them when they are young.
Right, it's a huge investment.
Absolutely.
It's a huge investment with a delayed payoff, which is, that's actually what parenting is. A huge investment, all of parenting, a huge investment, hopefully with a big payoff that you see a responsible citizen emerge.
Right. So we bond to our babies and they attach to us because of our hormones, and because they need to attach to a predictable, consistent figure. Now, when you talk about working women, you have to remember babies need to attach to someone. And so if we are going to have working women working, we also have to think about the impact on children and how to make sure that we have set up our society and the work environment for women so that the children can securely attach to them or somebody else. Because it can be a father, it can be a fantastic nanny, it can be a grandparent, but it needs to be somebody.
And this is where I think it's one of the places that our society doesn't really attend to women's needs, in that, you know, if you're lucky and grandma's around, good for you. There are many situations where the woman's a primary breadwinner and the father stays home more, good for you. But not everybody can afford a nanny, and you know, nannies are going to leave at some point, and then we get into the problem of if you have a new one every year, that's not so great for the kids. And so then we get daycare, which is expensive. So, I mean,
And daycare is expensive, and frequently we are entrusting our children in daycare to some poorly paid individuals. So of course they don't often have more than a high school education. And some of them will be wonderful and loving and terrific with our kids, but they rotate. And they don't stick with their jobs year after year, because when you're being paid minimum wage to take care of other people's children, and they yell a lot or they scream, or
well, they might not even. They could even be wonderful people, but they're not valued enough in society.
They're not valued enough.
Just as teachers aren't valued.
So they're not going to stay in a job when they can
it's
make
the most important job you could imagine, And yet they're not valued financially, like healthcare workers. They're
Absolutely.
not valued that much either.
Because it's typically been a woman's job.
Right, exactly.
And women are not valued.
That's exactly right.
Now, the other piece of attachment, which is important to realize here, is it's not the same in every child as it isn't in every woman and in every man. So you can have a child who is born biologically very secure. They don't cry a lot. They have good arousal. They go to sleep when they should go to sleep. They wake up reasonably. You feed them. They go back to sleep. They are okay when they are held. And that child securely will attach to a mom or a dad and be able to spread that trust and attachment to other people in their environment. But then you have children who come wired for insecurity, and they are just from the get-go biologically highly anxious children.
So do you think it's really wired for insecurity or wired for more anxiety or a big response to external stimuli?
I think it can be a variety of things. Some kids are really overwhelmed by changes in temperature and sound and noise, and they would rather just be held and cocooned and keep the rest of the world out. And so they don't soothe and they don't calm.
But that's not necessarily psychological. That's biological, so that a change in temperature makes them stressed.
Absolutely. Now those children may become insecurely attached because they cry so much. A mom wants to be there or a dad wants to be there and comfort them, but it's stressful. And I have friends who said, my gosh, no matter what I did, my kid cried. So anyone who wanted to hold my kid could hold my kid because it was too hard for me. Those kids may become insecurely attached because they are inadvertently doing the thing that pushes the parent away, because when they try and comfort the kid, because they're using externals to soothe the child still doesn't soothe real easily because biologically they're just somewhat immature inside.
And I think that's often a big stressor for parents.
Absolutely.
Because we take it and think we're doing something wrong.
Sure. So if work says, hey, you can come back anytime you want as a woman, and you've got this kid who screams bloody murder whenever you hold him or her, or when you put them down, they always start screaming, you'll easily go back to work because at work they don't scream. It's not being screamed at all the time.
Right, and so in our approach here today, which is to be solution-based and try to offer some solutions to women like us who've gone through all these things, what would you do in a situation like that?
Well, I think education is so important, and helping moms and dads understand the kind of child they have. When I work with families, I want to understand the child and understand the parent so I can explain the dynamic, because it should fit like a glove, what the kid needs and what the parent needs. And
or how to make it fit like a glove. It's not automatic that it's going to fit like a glove.
Absolutely not. And so if it doesn't fit and it's a little off, here's what your child's like. I know you really like to cuddle a lot, but your child is not a major cuddler. So you need to cuddle your child a little bit less and be comfortable stroking your child's back, but not scrunching your child tight. And so we get a more secure fit between the parent and child to help the child soothe and attach properly and help the parent feel good about their parenting. Because too often, women especially blame themselves if the child is crying too much, not sleeping through the night, not rolling over, has stranger anxiety, all these things that are normal. So certainly we need to be really educating our moms and our dads about the kind of kids they have, which means you really need a good family doctor or nurse practitioner or pediatrician who can ask questions about your child and say, it feels like this is the temperament your child has.
So let me go over this again, because we're talking about attachment issues, but we also have this thing called attachment parenting now, right? And these are two separate things. That's a method of parenting that some people choose to adopt, where they sleep in the same bed. And
no, I'm really
family bed.
Right, but I'm not talking about attachment.
No, you're not.
Parenting.
I know you're not. I'm trying to separate these two, so people don't think that's what you're talking about, because that's what we hear about most.
No, I'm talking about understanding who your child is from early on and adjusting your parenting. You can't make your child fit into what you want him or her to be, your baby. You need to be flexible. You're the grown-up.
And so just as when we have a teenager who maybe is too shy to go to the junior high dance, but we want him or her to go, we might structure it so that we help them get some friends to go with. We might drive them there. We might wait outside for a while, pick them up.
Or we might say, it's okay if you don't go. You want to have a couple of people over. So you create.
Too. But you're creating a situation where they can cope. And you're saying early on, if you think you need to hold your child all the time, but the child seems not comfortable or upset with that, and you're suggesting something like patting the child on the back, touching them in another way, you're really teaching them to cope, as opposed to forcing them to want to attach the way you think they should.
Absolutely. The other thing I think is important in terms of working women is that if a mom comes back and she understands that she biologically feels a need to see her child more frequently, and I know they have closed circuit TV so you can see what's happening, but that's not going to work. In fact, it'll make most women and children be more upset if they could see the child but they
not
can't
be able
touch.
to reach them. Yeah.
Babies aren't about seeing; they're
Right.
about being held,
Right.
and they're about
Right.
hearing the voice,
Right.
About being fed. So, saying it's okay for you to leave during the day, every 2 or 3 hours if necessary, and go home or go to the daycare and spend time with your child.
Okay, but we know that's not going to happen. It hasn't happened yet.
But it
and
should.
But you and I were the first women through the door. At least I was in the 70s. You're a little younger, but we were the first women through the door here. It hasn't happened yet. You know it's not going to happen for the women having kids today. So then what do you do?
Well, then you try. Well, but see, I don't think you can just be helpless about this, Teena, and say it's not going to happen.
For the majority of women, it's not going to happen.
If there's a way to get your boss to be more flexible with your 8 hours, and you'll put in your 8 hours, but you're going to take a 2-hour break in the middle of the day and maybe share it with another woman or share your job with a man, and that you both work staggered kinds of schedules.
I believe that in some situations those things can happen, and I'm with you. I think being empowered is way better than being a victim, okay? So I think we need to try to work these things out. But for the vast majority of women in the United States of America, they go to work, they're expected to be there 8 hours, and they go home, and there's no job sharing, and there's no this kind of stuff. What can they do?
Well, I think what's important for those women, if they don't have access to flexible bosses and daycare and those kinds of things, and they have to work, and they're worried about attachment, because attachment, a well-attached child can take the trust he or she has with the mom or the dad and transfer it to someone
Absolutely.
else.
So that's why we said earlier, a child doesn't learn, there's maybe a primary attachment, but they don't learn to just be attached to one person. In fact, when they're around 8 months and they start to have separation anxiety, that's actually a good thing, right?
Right,
Because they're
absolutely.
starting to realize that everybody isn't mom or dad, but they can learn the better they attach to other people, the happier we are, and we want to think, although maybe we can't prove it, that might mean that their attachment issues are pretty mellow.
Right. So work with people in your community.
Okay.
So if there are other women in your community who have children, talk to them about them taking care of your child, and that you get support, because frequently what can be done, if it is not done financially, is an arrangement where during the day you take care of my child, and at night I will take care of your child. And you help the child learn to attach and trust somebody else who you trust, so when somebody else changes their diaper, you're happy, you're saying nice things, and they say, okay, this is an okay person. Okay, I can stay with her, and I'll let her change my diaper during the day.
So you're saying be creative.
Be creative. Reach out to your neighbors. Reach out to other women who are staying at home. Reach out to other people who have a different work schedule. So maybe they work at night, you work during the day. And look towards your community to find other resources to help give your children secure attachment while you are still working.
See, one of the things that I think about a lot is that my grandmother was widowed twice by the time she was 34. She had 7 children. 2 of them died in infancy from one of the plagues that went around. And
One of those.
One of those plagues. So it was like smallpox or something before they had, vaccinations and things like that. And she lived in rural Ohio, so I mean, this was not a sophisticated area, right? But she reared 5 girls who all seemed to me to be fairly squared away. And certainly empowered. When you have 5 aunts, you really get a window on empowerment, and no uncles. So I mean, they ruled everything. And I sometimes think we forget that in most of the history of the world, women did work, but it wasn't necessarily outside of the home. I mean, they work all the time still today. That's the biggest joke. Are you a working woman? Are you kidding me? Am I a woman? If I am, I'm working. I mean, that's what women do, right? Not that men don't, but women primarily run the nest. And so I just wonder sometimes if we get people too anxious when we talk about these things, because by and large, things work out. Like, by and large, your good sense and your oxytocin and your biology can take you far.
Absolutely. And for the most part, women work outside of the house in many different fields, and the kids are fine. I think we just really have to remember that we can't just say, because you can work, you should, and the kids are going to be okay.
All right, so you're talking about that pressure on women that they have to go out into the workplace, and there's something wrong with them if they don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and,
I think that's terrible.
That you should just do it with no consideration that how will this impact my child? Now, it's interesting when you talk about larger families, why are larger families okay? And I was watching Today's Show today, and they had on this family, like the Duggars, with 19 children. This woman looked like she was about 25, and she's 19 children and counting. Well, how do 19 children work out? Well, because these 19 children are not all attached to her. I guarantee you some of the younger ones are very seriously attached to the 14, 15,
and they may be attached to her, but also to the 14 and 15
because if you have 19 children, you might say, you know, you diaper this one, you feed that one, you take this one to the potty.
And but I think that's a great model, don't you?
And
I mean, not that I want to have 19 children for sure, but good for her if she can pull it off. But I mean, that's a great model, having a larger base within the primary family.
And that was the whole point. If there were 5 children, 5 girls, you asked your children to help take care of the younger ones. And so attachment to a primary figure can happen with someone other than a mother, and using people and understanding that that's okay is a reasonable thing to do.
And I look at my grandchildren, of whom there are 12, okay, and they're all very attached to their mothers and their fathers, but I also see some of the younger ones very much attached to the older siblings. And I look at some of these older grandchildren and I think, wow, she or he would make as great a parent as anyone I can imagine, because they've modeled on their mother and father, and so that child has that consistency.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think recognizing that we have to let our kids attach to other people, and
not think that that means we failed.
Absolutely. I remember way back when there was questions about whether or not it's okay to have a nanny and how women react to having a nanny, and they get jealous. And I think it was T. Berry Brazelton who said, it's never bad to have more than one person love your child.
Right, I agree.
And so if you walk into a room with your child and he or she smiles at other people and is willing to be held by someone else, that's not a bad thing.
It means you succeeded, not that you failed.
Well, okay. Doesn't mean you succeeded. You can't measure your success on whether or not your child easily goes from one person to another.
Well, that's true, because there could be other variables. Right.
But it means that's a good thing.
Right.
And you need to say, wait a minute, the fact that I work outside of the house, that I contribute to making sure we have what we need, and my child likes other people and is secure if I go into school with them and then leave and they don't scream bloody murder like the other 2-year-olds in the room.
But if they do, they'll get over it. I mean,
they'll get over it, but it means that your child can attach to other people and you're a good parent, not that.
I think that's a big issue. I think that's a big issue. So let's say that issue again. When we see our children not only attached to us, but to others in their sphere of influence, knowing that some kids are going to more easily do that than other ones, so we have to know the nature of our child to start with. It's important when we drop them off at daycare or with the primary nurturer while we're gone, grandma, a woman that watches the kids, daddy, whoever it is, and they take to them well. It doesn't mean they don't love us or that we haven't provided for them.
Right, and so parents who will say, did you miss me while you were at school? I look at them and say, don't ask your child that.
Exactly.
They missed you, they'd scream and yell.
Right.
The point is, they hold a sense of you securely inside of them.
And so as mothers, when we have those kinds of feelings, Did they miss us while we were gone? Whatever. It's really, I think, because we're constantly measuring ourselves as to are we good enough, because we live in this culture which I believe consistently tells mothers the hardest job in the world. Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That, and the job that needs to be respected, just like teachers and childcare workers need to be respected. If we want a great society, that's where it starts, right? But yet we're always judging ourselves, am I good enough? So sometimes we misread things.
Right. So there are mothers who stay home and their kids still have problems with drugs and alcohol and depression and anxiety. And there are mothers who work and their kids have trouble with drugs and alcohol and depression and anxiety.
Because there's a lot we can't control.
Absolutely. Biology is incredibly important.
Exactly.
And at any given time, what I say to a parent is, who's really upset and crying and feeling really guilty when they're in my office, you're doing the best job you can do at the time you're doing it. And you're saying now, I shouldn't have yelled at my child last night. But it's okay. People get frustrated. You yell sometimes. When there is a good, secure attachment and there's a lot of money in the bank of the parent-child relationship, the kid gets over it. You can make mistakes
and say you're sorry, just like we do in other situations, and then change our behavior. So it doesn't work to say you're sorry and not change your behavior, but we all make mistakes. Who's perfect at this? And I couldn't agree with you more that there are so many variables affecting kids out there, as there always have been. This isn't new. The variables change, but the effect doesn't change all that much, right? And there's only so much we can do as parents. Hopefully, we can teach them how to say no to certain things, but that's not gonna always happen.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because we grew up with, Women's Lib and Betty Friedan and, women should, and it was supposed to be about women should have the choice.
Right.
I don't think we have the choice, because the reality is we have to work in most
in this economy, in this country right now, 73% of the families are dual income. And I don't think they're raking in the dough. I think they're paying the rent and trying to make the mortgage.
Absolutely. So there isn't the choice. And even if we have the choice, women still feel differently. Men don't feel guilty when they get up and go to work when their child is 3 weeks old. Any woman I know is going to feel guilty if she says, I'm really happier at work than I am taking care of my baby. She feels like there's something wrong with her. And we really have to help women understand that needing outside stimulation is okay, and not being 100% fulfilled by your baby is okay. But because they have this oxytocin, and especially after birth, they have a lot of it, we have to provide them with opportunities to bond with their children.
I think that's so great.
You know?
So great. Now, how do we change an entire society to make this happen? Or should we do another show? Can we solve this problem in
how do we change
minutes?
the society? Really? How do we change it? I think we need more female leaders.
I think so too.
I think
That's
that
absolutely true.
We don't seem to understand that women solve problems differently. We understand compromise. We understand flexibility. We understand multitasking. You know, a woman can hold a child on her hip, talk on the phone with work, and be doing dinner simultaneously.
Absolutely.
And you know what? It works.
With that little corpus callosum that we have, the fiber between both sides, a little bit thicker, about up to 45% in women in certain areas. So
we
live wide. We see it all, right?
When they say men are like simple-minded, it's really men are single-minded. They think with one part of their brain, they're reacting and they're doing. We can multitask and do a lot of things. So I always have believed, and I am a diehard liberal. People know that about me. But even if a woman Republican is running, I will look at her values as a human being and what she thinks about women, and I'm thinking about that. So it's not down the line only liberal candidates, it's as a woman.
Oh, I agree. I don't think it's about politics. I don't think it's about that at all. In fact, I was just at a very conservative institute this past week where they were discussing, to some extent, the financial world. And this very big researcher that said things will change when we have more women in this workplace.
Really?
Yes. So, I mean, I don't think this is Democrat and Republican issues. I think that we need what both men and women bring to the table. And so in so many spheres, women have not been able to get to that table.
Which is just the weirdest thing in the United States, because we're one of the few major powers in the
Right.
world that has never had a woman higher than
That's
a
right.
position of Secretary of
Which
State.
really tells you a lot, but we don't have time to talk about it today. So we're going to come back and continue this conversation. Dr. Sharon Press, thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you, Teena.
appreciate you
I
being
enjoyed
here.
talking to you.
Thanks to you for watching. Take care of yourselves, and we'll continue this. Take care. Bye-bye.